So I didn't know how important this is for people. But after doing a podcast with Britt Hartley of No Nonsense Spirituality, she helped me see that people care about this a lot, and a couple of issues. There's people who I'm going to use my words here, my interpretation. They adopt the view that free will doesn't exist because somebody else did that is famous and is a specialist in some field, and then they're depressed about what they see as the fact that they don't have free will. It's really weird. I wonder if the connection between believing there's no free will and then being depressed about it, I wonder if that can only happen if you're just believing what someone else said without coming and arriving at the conclusion yourself with your own reasoning.
I think that's a little bit problematic, but I think if we want to say who actually falls under this category, I'm not sure it's actually as wide as it might appear at the beginning. Because if you're saying that there are people who are following certain famous people, be it scientists or philosophers, who say that just because of the general impression that you get, and then you end up being depressed because of it, it obviously means that there's a kind of a conflict between what you believe internally or through your history, culturally, with that newfound knowledge that you have incorporated into your worldview.
Well, somebody that doesn't follow the pattern I just said, I'm pretty sure Sam Harris arrived. He says there's no free will. Pretty sure he arrived at that, using his own reasoning, even if somebody else also had it. I'm pretty sure because he can argue it himself. It's not like he needs to call someone else.
Well, here's the problem with this. It's not about reasoning about it. Let's think about the following situation. When I see some pronouncement that is made by scientists about whatever phenomenon, I'm going to tend to take their word for it, not because I have necessarily examined this, but because I know that scientific progress hasn't reached the point it has reached without a sound method that can be tested. If I have the time and the ability to go and test their claims, I would be able to make that determination. So there are so many things that we do take without really a lot of examination, and incorporate in our worldview from science because of its being pronounced by people that have that kind of authority.
But when they're doing that on science issues, and let's be specific, what kind of stuff? Let's say something in physics. Generally, when that's happening, there's only one view. There's no opposing view. Am I right? Like, let's say we're talking about Einstein and general relativity or something, and let's say it's not now, but let's say go back 100 years, and somebody that doesn't know a lot about physics is going to say, okay, fine, Einstein's account of gravity may whatever. I don't understand it really, but that's the truth. That was the only view.
No, not necessarily
made any sense.
Well, it did take a lot of time, and it wasn't until you had some actual verification, measurable verification, that
that's when you got to the point. We're talking about the context where a bunch of people are believing something, and I'm saying it's because there was only the one thing. If you're talking about when they weren't sure whether it's Newton or Einstein, people weren't doing that yet. They were just believing Newton still. That's the old theory.
Well, these are very... So something like free will is not that it has multiple views. It's that we have a poor understanding of the underlying phenomena, which is basically consciousness and how the human brain develops consciousness and relates to the world. And so you end up with various points of view, and yet you can look at certain aspects of experimental science that has to do with the brain that point to a direction that shows you that.
But, let me clarify my point further.
Okay.
Okay, so there's and I'm going to pick on atheists here, because religious people have their own view about free will. It's in their book, whatever.
Okay.
There's people who think, okay, if I become an atheist, and then because they happen to know what some atheists say about free will, they're like, now I have to believe there's no free will. But they're ignoring a basic point, that there are atheists who are also famous and philosophers who say there is free will. So they're not even actually looking at that possibility. They're acting like there's only one possibility.
Yeah, and we have to also remember that when you're delving with into something that's related to free will, you don't necessarily have to think about this from a religious point of view, even though historically religion did frame a lot of that discussion. When you're talking about this from a philosophical and scientific point of view, you have so many tools that could generate people who are religious, who believe in free will, people who are religious that don't believe in free will, and you have a combination. Yeah. So, for example,
religious and no free will. How does that work?
Well,
what religion says that?
Well, if you go to Islam, one of the biggest arguments that you had at the beginning is because the Quran itself says conflicting things about free will. At one point, it gives the impression that God is controlling everything, and then at some other point, it gives you the impression that you're able to do whatever you want. And so people actually thought about this, and right now you have different currents that emphasize different aspects of what the Quran was really saying.
So I never really got to the point of why I started this. So people that become atheists, and then if they adopt the view that there's no free will, and then if they get depressed by that, now they have an incentive to adopt another religion or go back to the same old one, just so they can feel better about having free will again.
Well, I'm not sure that there is a kind of a direct correlation between atheism and the lack of free will, because here's the thing. Consider what many religious people say about the prospects of leaving religion. They would say, we can start from someone like Dostoevsky, for example, who was talking about whatever, if you have no God, then everything becomes permitted. So that's the basis for morality that is supposed to have come from religion.
It's like saying if you become an atheist, you automatically get free will, and you didn't have free will when you were in a religion.
Yeah, you become completely liberated from all restraints to do whatever you want. That religion was the thing that created the basis for morality, and that according to that, once you become an atheist, there's absolutely nothing that's preventing you from anything, whether good or bad.